Hi, I'm Tony Morris, and welcome to the latest episode of Southern Soul. Now, some of you may be wondering, why is it called Southern Soul? So let's talk about the title for a second. Southern is because I'm originally from Alabama, and you can probably every once in a while pick up on a little bit of an accent. The soul part is because guess what? I'm a psychic. That's right, a psychic. And I know some of you out there might be scratching your head saying, I'm watching a show about a psychic? Me? I'm watching a show about a psychic? But that's okay, because life is all about learning, right? And together, we're going to cover a lot of ground. We're going to talk about not only my career and some aspects of what I do, but we're going to be talking about a lot of different topics as it relates to the world of spirituality, New Age thought, or as I like to call it, ancient wisdoms. So if you're just joining us for the first time, on an earlier episode of Southern Soul, I actually asked for the viewers to send in some questions. Questions not only about what I do as a psychic, but also questions about the world of spirituality. And you know that old saying, be careful what you wish for? Well, you came through. I got a lot of questions. And we're going to take a few of those right now. Let's start with the first one. By the way, I have to use the glasses, otherwise I can't see a thing. Imagine me trying to do a crossword puzzle. First question. Is there a particular time of year that's best to have a psychic consultation? You know, while there are certain energies associated, say, with things like the climate or the lunar cycles, I don't think they necessarily dictate when it's the best time to have a psychic reading. Now granted, lunar cycles and the climate certainly play a role in when, say, farmers plant their crops and harvest their crops, etc. But I really think that when it comes to a psychic consultation, it's really up to the client or the person themselves. You know, what feels right? What time of year feels right? And I will tell you this, though. I get a lot of clients, for whatever reason, love to do a session on or around their birthday. Think about it, birthday. Okay, second question. Have you ever seen a ghost? Yes. And I don't mean like Casper the Ghost or Ghostbusters or any of those crazy horror movies that are out there right now. I think there's one out now called The Conjuring or something like that. Anyway, it's not that kind of ghost. But nonetheless, yes, I've seen them. And one in particular was quite prominent, and it was also quite personal. It was my late grandfather. I was driving down the road late one night, probably around midnight, and there he was, standing on the side of this darkened highway, wearing overalls and a dress shirt. Now get this, my mother, who's sitting in the passenger seat, saw him as well. And together we both said, "Did you just see what I saw?" We both nodded in agreement. Let me tell you something else. When my grandfather passed away, he was buried in his overalls and a dress shirt. I don't think that's a coincidence. Okay, third question. Have you ever had any past life regression work done? Oh yeah. 7 years ago, it was probably like a 3-hour session, and a lot of work was done where I went through different past lives. One in particular. Ever since I was a child, I've always had a fascination with Easter Island. And some of you may know about Easter Island, or at least where it's located. It's probably the most remote place on this planet. It's located out in the middle of the South Pacific Ocean. I think it's only like 63 square miles big. But ever since I was a child, I've always been fascinated with this place. And it's famous for these great, large, megaton stone sculptures that are called moai. I know you've seen pictures of them before. But ever since I was a kid, I've always been fascinated with Easter Island. I've read books, I saw I don't know how many documentaries on the place. And get this, There was a place in Panama City, Florida called Goofy Golf. That's right, Goofy Golf. Go Google it. Google Goofy. Anyway, Goofy Golf, and it's a putt-putt course, and they have all these different figurines that you putt your balls around or whatever. They actually had a life-size moai, one of those giant stone sculptures. And even when I was a child, I would go to this large stone sculpture first. I would like make a beeline for it. Even my mother tells me to this day, yes, when you were a kid, before we even got our little putters and everything, you wanted to go to that statue. So I never took that for granted. And when I had my past life regression session 7 years ago in Lexington, Kentucky, guess what? The first place that I went to during the session was, yes, to Easter Island, or as it's formally known as, Rapa Nui. During the session, I learned more about that past life and how it impacts who and what I do today. And on today's episode of Southern Soul, we're going to talk about past life regression. Now, I had the great fortune of going to Easter Island 3 years ago. And let me tell you, from the minute I landed until the minute I left that island, something magical was always happening to me. And I have to thank the very first person that I met when I arrived on that island, Carlos Peralta, a man from Chile who also happened to be my tour guide for the entire week while I was there. And guess what? Today he's our special guest. Together we're going to talk about not only my experiences on Easter Island, but what makes Easter Island so special.
How long have y'all been here now? 3 years? 2.5? 2 years. 2 years. Yeah. Wow.
We were able to mention your coffee business.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it.
We're now here with our special guest, Carlos Peralta, and we're going to talk about my trip to Easter Island and the spiritual experiences that I encountered. And folks, he was the first person I met when I landed on that famous island that's located out in the middle of the South Pacific. I'm glad you're here today.
No, I'm glad you invited me.
Okay. The first question I have for you is, I know when I got into the van, when you picked me up at the airport, the first question you asked me was, what brought you to Easter Island?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I had certain reasons, one of which I told you that I lived there in a previous life, which I truly believed. But in your own words, what do you think brings people to Easter Island?
Well, I think that's a very. I used to always. I was very intrigued by the motives that brought people to a very isolated island in the world, in the whole world. And it's such a small island. I mean, it's 64 square
miles.
It's tiny, tiny. And so that's why I would ask all the people that I met, that I would pick up in the airport or whatever, what was the reason, what brought them there. And it's funny because you would hear all kinds of answers, like going from spiritual to knowing more about the history of the world and knowing more about humanity.
Yeah, it has a rich history, that's for sure. And the spirituality, it was, folks, my radar was going off like crazy. Speaking of spirituality, one of the fondest memories that I have is whenever I was describing to you after we had been on a hike. We did a lot of hiking, but we had been on a hike, and I had meditated, and I had seen this vision of a bunch of people, not a bunch, but a collection of folks running down this mountain or this hill, all excited, like they had news to share, and then they presented the tribal chief with like a wooden oar. And do you remember what you told me, what I had described?
Yeah, so there was a period of the island, in the history of the island, where they ran out of resources, and there were megalithic. They would worship ancestors through stone, through these very well-known stone statues. And when they ran out of resources to keep carving them and transporting them, they had to come up with a way to bring back social order. So they transitioned from being tribal to have some sort of a, not a democracy, but some sort of new order for them, and they came up with this competition called the Tangatamanu, or Birdman competition. And basically the competition was on the top of one of the three volcanoes, one of the three corners of the island. It has a huge crater, and
You took me there.
Yes, yes, we
Yeah.
were there, and basically they would climb down this 350 feet cliff. They would swim all the way to close island, and they would basically gather the first egg of a sacred bird, um, where they would. So whoever got the first egg of the season was the winner of the competition, but they had to swim back.
That's the
Swim
tough
back
part.
to the big island and then climb up this 350 feet cliff. Whoever got there first was the winner of the competition. Now, the winner of the competition was some sort of a warrior or an athlete representing the tribe, but that would make the chief tribe the ruler of the island for a whole year. So it had a very important political. It was very important politically for the island. So once there was a winner for that competition, they would do a whole celebration. They would all walk down this crater towards where the rest of the island would. They were expecting
They were waiting for the news.
They were waiting for the news. They were waiting who's going to be the new ruler of the island. So when they would climb down, they would bring a Norse. That's actually
present
a
it to the
historic
chief?
fact, and they would present it. So if one chief of the tribe was carrying the horse, that means that everyone knew. Oh, that's the new ruler. That's the new chief of the island.
Yeah. Fascinating story, and fascinating bit of the island's history for sure. The other part of the island that really fascinated me was when we went to the rock quarry, because we can't talk about Easter Island, or as it's formerly known, Rapa Nui, without not talking about the famous stone statues, or what's called the moai.
Yes.
And what's the significance of the moai?
Well, like I said before, the history of the island, it changed a long time. So when they first settled on the island, they all spread through the island, and they became a tribal island where each tribe would have their own ways, but they would still have the same beliefs. You have to remember that the Rapa Nui people, they are Polynesians, so their belief system, it's basically, and their language and their genetics, it's all Polynesian. So it's the same culture as Hawaiians and as New Zealanders and Tahitians. They're all the same. They come from the same place. So for them, it was just like in Hawaii, you have the tikis that are made out of wood. Rapa Nui, they didn't have enough wood. But they did have a lot of rocks.
Yeah.
A lot of volcanic rocks.
Huge quarry.
This is an island that has, it's a volcanic island, so it has 180 volcanoes. They're all inactive, but they're all like it's a whole volcano, you know. So what they would do is that they would carve, they would try to represent past ancestors, and they would carve them. Imitating or trying to represent them the best as they could, and they would transport these huge statues. They would transport them all the way from the quarry towards the village.
Right. What's the significance of the eyes of the moai?
Well, in Polynesian culture, there is this concept called mana, and mana is spiritual energy, and in Polynesian and more specifically for Rapa Nui culture, this spiritual energy was transmitted through the eyes. Eyes were very important in their culture, and that's why these big statues, they had coral eyes. And actually, the actual name of the statues is called Aringa Ora Otetupuna, which means the living face of the ancestors. It was a representation of an ancestor, and when an ancestor passed away, they wanted to make sure that their energy remained where the people were living, so they would transport these big statues to this platform, and then they would place them in a way so that the statue with its squirrel eyes would always face the village, and they were always overseeing and watching them. That was the whole purpose of these big statues.
Yeah. So Easter Island, like Carlos has shared with us, is packed not only with spiritual energy, but historical significance as well, representing a number of different eras and a number of different cultures all kind of coming together. Again, I know I had my personal favorites for the week that I was there, and I'm so fortunate that you were part of my experience. But do you have any special memory yourself of being on Easter Island?
Well, I think that in my personal life, that was one of the biggest adventures, and and so many things happened in my life while I was on Easter Island. So it's packed of very important stuff that happened. Even what I do now, even the business that I have now, it was all incepted or created while I was hiking with people and talking to very important people. I mean, you were one of the important people that I met there, but I met I know the Chilean president. I met CEOs. I met the founder of the Cirque du Soleil. So it was a very inspiring part of my life.
Your journey, yeah.
My journey, yes.
Yeah. The most blessed event that happened to me while I was on Easter Island was I got to do my first reading for someone who is Chilean, or Rapa Nui, actually, right?
Yeah.
Native Rapa Nui from Easter Island, and Easter Island is part of Chile now.
Yes.
And Carlos here was my translator. Remember that?
Yeah.
So, do you remember like a couple of the things
Well,
that we talked about?
I don't remember that much, but I remember that she was having problems with. There were like a bunch of brothers. There were like, I don't know.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
10, 9, I don't remember. And she had a brother who was very close to her.
I remember that.
And they were having this dispute of land, but he had passed away. So she wanted to, in a way, maybe, I don't know, maybe validate or I don't know what she wanted, but she wanted to talk to you.
And that's right. The brother came through with a message for her. He actually showed me some scenes, and I relayed them to her, thanks to your translation. And she was like, "Yes, that's it. I know what you're talking about." So
I think the biggest, because I don't remember the whole situation. Well, actually, you know what? I might ruin it. But I was not the translator.
who was?
Maha, remember, or someone else, because I remember that then Maha told me about it, and that made it it even more.
Okay, so you
that
set
even
it up,
validated more to me, because it was someone else who told me, "Oh, this guy just made a reading for her, and he was totally right."
Yeah.
You know, because I think that in a way it's very subjective, or it can be like suspicious that I was a translator and I'm validating what you're saying.
That's right. Yeah, because
That's why I don't remember it that well.
You hooked me up with her, or somebody did. I forgot. Anyway,
I remember. Because I remember this is what I remember. I remember I was. You were having lunch or something like that, and I had to go to the front desk, this admin stuff that we had to do, and she asked me about you, and I said that you were a psychic, and she's like, oh, and she got all excited. She's like, oh, my brother just passed away, and I wonder if he would do a read for me. And then I remember, I'll talk to him because he's super nice. He would gladly do it. And I spoke to you, and
Right.
I remember you said, yeah, I'm going to talk to her after, I don't know, before going to dinner or something like that. But I had off that afternoon.
Right.
And then you did it, and when I came back the next day, I remember one of the guys who was the translator, she told me all about it. And then I asked the front desk lady, and she was all excited because with you without knowing, you saw someone who was limping,
Yeah.
and her brother had a problem limping,
Right.
and you mentioned, I don't know exactly know what happened, but this person really validated what you
I
the
remember
reading.
that, yeah. Like I said, it was a very special moment for me.
I remember one of the things that where I actually, I don't know, I could I don't want to say validate you, but what I could see that you knew something is that you mentioned that there were a bunch of people. You saw a vision of a bunch of people in the hotel area, and the hotel area it had a cave that was prior to the building of the hotel. I don't know if that's well said, but
Right.
I don't know if you understand or you want to explain it.
No, I think, yeah, before the hotel was
Is it
built,
understandable?
It was a cave.
So people used to live there before the hotel, like years ago, before the hotel was built, and actually they had to cut the wing of one of the wings of the hotel. They had to cut them and or discontinue it. Is that a word?
Right.
Because there was a cave and they couldn't touch it because it was an archaeological artifact or
Like
area. Sacred ground and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember telling you that I had seen visions of
Yeah.
ancestors of the island, and then you validated and said, "Oh yes," and you told me the story, so that was fascinating.
Well, and the funny thing is that the all the ghost stories or whatever the keepers or the maids of the hotel would tell, they were all in that wing where
I stayed?
Yeah, well, the wing where the caves were.
Okay, the
I
cave.
think that's where you stayed actually. So that's why I was very curious with what you had to
Yeah.
say, because a lot of people would say, like, maids, they wouldn't want to do any work around there at night or something like that because they got really scared because they heard noises and stuff.
Things that go bump in the night. Folks, I gotta let you in on a big secret. Carlos is from Chile, and again, we met on the most remote place on this planet, right? Easter Island. It takes an effort to get there. It's not just a quick airplane trip.
Yeah.
But the incredible news is now he and his wife now live only 14 miles away from me in California. And I don't think that's necessarily a coincidence, do you?
Well, I don't believe in coincidence at all. I mean, you might not have the answers for stuff, but I don't believe in coincidence in
Yeah.
general. So yeah, it's so amazing. And when I think that when we went hiking and get to talk and all that, I believe that in a way, because I told you at one point, well, I think my life is going towards the U.S. to move into the U.S. because my wife was born and raised here in California. So who knew that after
Yeah.
a few years we would end up living,
Yeah.
we would be neighbors basically.
Again, Carlos, thanks so much for being on the show. It
you.
really did make a difference in helping me share my Easter Island experience and what it meant to me. And I'm so grateful that you were part of it. And again, folks, if you've ever had any desire to go explore Easter Island, go do it. Look into it. You won't regret it.
I've got a question for you. How many of you, when you were a kid, used to sit on the stairs in your house? Or maybe the steps on your front porch? There was something about, I don't know, just sitting on the stairs that was just part of being a kid. You know, whether it was coming down the stairs on Christmas morning to see what Santa Claus had brought, or sitting out on the front steps of your porch, watching the other kids come by on their bicycles or their skateboards. Now, another thing that reminds me of childhood is the little red wagon. Think about it. When you're a kid, it was probably your first toy. And it's a metaphor for life. It's what you put your dreams, it's what you put your aspirations in, and it follows you throughout your entire life. It's always there. We just have to acknowledge it. On the very first episode of Southern Soul, I asked that the viewers write down three things that they still want to accomplish in their life, and put them in their little red wagon. Pretty simple. Second episode, I asked that people identify one action item that they could do for each of those three things and put that in your little red wagon. So that brings us to this episode. You're probably wondering, well, what's he going to talk about now? We've already identified what we want to do. We've already identified some action steps. Now we're going to talk about the appropriate and most of all, positive mindset. Why take the time of identifying what you want to do and some action items if you're going to approach it with, well, that'll never happen. If you got that attitude, it probably won't. So it's going to be just as important to not only identify what it is you want to do, those action items, but having the right mindset. Now, when I do some of my psychic consultation sessions, I do have clients who will automatically start putting barriers or obstacles out there before they even start the process. You're not doing yourself any favors by doing that. One way, and I love this idea, one way that you can kind of help move yourself into more of a positive attitude is have a fair playing field. I call it a fair playing field, meaning if you're going to put energy in identifying the reasons why something couldn't happen in your life, for example, I'm too old, I don't have enough energy, or I don't have a car. Do yourself a big, big favor. Identify and embrace reasons why something could happen to you. I've got great health. I've got great ideas. People appreciate my thoughts. So make it a fair playing field. That's one way to kind of ease you into a more positive mindset if you're having trouble doing that. So if you combine all this, it's kind of like a mixture, like you're creating, this great item, this great delicious recipe to go in your little red wagon. Identify what you want to do, those three things. Identify some action steps, but then embrace it with the appropriate mindset. I promise you, keep following this, you're going to see some results. Guaranteed. Thanks so much for joining us on this latest episode of Southern Soul. It means so much to me that you took the time to check us out. Keep following those dreams of yours, and most of all, keep rolling.
Yeah.